religion was used to inflict the ultimate revenge on the children of Israel. The enemy used the things given to us by the Most High to include our gifts and talents against us. Let's talk about how it was done. In the live session this past week, we talked about the gods of our enemy. If you have not listened to that message, I really encourage you to go back and listen to it. I'll leave the link in the description box. But we really have to evaluate how we have been, quote unquote, doing church. We know that slave owners used religion as a tool to oppress and manipulate our people. Our ancestors were often forced to attend church services, and then they would have them listen to sermons that stressed obedience and submission to the slave master. In many cases, they used Christianity to emphasize the idea that slaves were inferior and that it was their duty to only submit and obey. Here's the thing: manipulation. The manipulation practices and tactics that they used did not end after so-called emancipation. Just like it was in the days of slavery, under the right control and with the right preacher, the religion of Christianity continued to reinforce the mindset of slavery, and it allowed Esau to get his ultimate revenge on the seed of Jacob. Let's make sure we understand that our disobedience did get us kicked out of our land. We don't want to overlook that fact. But we also need to understand that there are things that kept us tethered to a system created by our enemies to keep us in subjection. So we need to look at the religious system and the rituals they use. We're also going to talk about worship, because many believe that's the reason for going to church. Some of you may remember how there would be those who would run, they would shout and jump around when the music was playing, and as soon as the preacher started preaching, what would they do? Fall asleep. Near the end of the message, the pastor would bring the organist up to play, and when the music started playing again, they would wake up, get excited, and jump around again, so that the message or the church service would end on a high note. If you asked them what the preacher preached about, they couldn't tell you. They just knew that they had a good time in church. What is that, family? Conditioning. Conditioning, mind control. This was not an infrequent occurrence. It happened a lot in black churches. So preachers became creative. They added more things to entertain, to keep people excited so that they would continue to come back. They started bringing in entertainers. That's what we need to call them, entertainers. They started bringing in the well-known gospel artists. That's the draw for a lot of churches. Folks would pack the church out if they knew certain singers would be there. So there is a supernatural component to this, a spiritual link to this form of conditioning and mind control that's connected to the demonic realm. Worship is great. Worship is wonderful. The Most High created us to worship Him. But we have to remember that our oppressors gave us their religion. They interpreted a lot of things for us. They interpreted what it meant to be saved, which was to be delivered from the power of sin. In some churches, to be saved means that you get saved when you join the church and you get baptized. For our people, we were only looking forward to the sweet by and by, when our enemies continue to dominate and subjugate us. Now we know that salvation is also the deliverance of the holy people from their enemies here on earth. We were never taught what salvation means for us, for Israel. Messiah said this, I came to seek and to save that which was lost. Who was he talking about? The children of Israel. So it's time to think about who shaped our frame of reference as it pertains to salvation and the way we do church. Or should I say, the way we did church. There are those who have a vested interest in keeping us on the bottom and keeping us walking in ignorance. These are things we need to talk about. So, for most of you coming out of churchianity, you know that the church choirs were a vital part of the black church experience. A lot of our people will attend a church and even join because of the choir. In some churches, the choir is the selling point. A lot of famous singers got their start where? In the black church. Gospel music had a major influence on our people. But just how deep does this influence go? Let's take a look at this journal article from Johns Hopkins Medicine, and it's entitled Harnessing the Healing Power of Music. Just listening to music activates more brain regions simultaneously than any other human activity. Did you catch that? Just listening to music activates more brain regions at the same time than any other human activity. Let's go on. It says, therein lies both the challenge and promise studying music's effects on the brain. There is likely something for everyone when it comes to using music as medicine. But how do you separate the effects on specific brain networks if they are being activated simultaneously? It says songs associated with strong memories can activate the pleasure center of the brain. But there's also an opposite effect. Let's take a look at that and we'll come back to this. This comes from Psychology Today. They're asking the question, why does music evoke memories? So it says, the relationship between music and memory is powerful. Music evokes powerful emotions that then bring back memories. When we listen to a piece of music from years ago, we seem to travel back to that moment. We can feel everything as if we were there. So just think about black gospel music. It tends to be rooted in what? The circumstances of an enslaved people still trying to get over its effects. Is that what other groups sing about? It says memories stimulated by music often come from certain times in our lives. So what are most of our people constantly reliving? Their struggles. Now let's go back to the Johns Hopkins article. It's telling us that relaxing music can lower the production of cortisol, which lowers stress and in turn lowers elevated heart rates and blood pressure. It's also telling us that music can affect the default mode network that is active during daydreaming, also the hippocampus that plays a prominent role in forming new memories. It says music can also affect how well we pay attention and our working memory. It's tied to various parts of the brain responsible for motor skills. Do you think there's more to music than meets the eye? I do. Now think about the job Hasatan, or Lucifer, Satan, the devil, whatever you call him. Think about his job before he was kicked out. Here's the thing. Praise and worship is an extremely powerful weapon. Hear me. It's an extremely powerful weapon when it's used correctly to worship Yah, but it is also powerful when it's used against the people of the Most High. Think about what happened with Saul when David began playing the harp. The demon spirit left him. That's an example of music being used correctly to bring about deliverance. Shouldn't we see the same thing happening today? But instead, a lot of what is called praise and worship music is making folks remember their days in the club. Do you think that's going to bring about deliverance? A lot of the praise and worship leaders are like what my husband would call fruity. There's a principality behind this family. Why is the music industry so keen on making our singers front and center? They know the power and influence of music. The enemy is trying to harness the power of something that was meant to be good. It can be used to affect change and powerful emotions. It's not a coincidence that music, praise, and worship is in an area where we dominate. That gift was placed in us for a reason, and the enemy's trying to use it to his advantage. Think about the supernatural things that happened in Scripture when our ancestors began to praise Yah. To the enemy, that's a threat. And who would know more about this than Esau? Let's look at this from encyclopedia.com to see how all of this traces back to Esau and his descendants. It's talking about the Etruscan heritage. It says the Etruscans were a people who dominated the area of Etruria and Latium in northern Italy before Rome emerged as the central power. Archaeologists have discovered a large number of imported Greek vases in Etruscan tombs, proving that they had a thriving trade with the Greeks from at least the 5th century BCE, perhaps earlier. The fresco art in some of the tombs also indicates Greek influence. One grave, the so-called Tomb of the Leopards in Tarquinia, contains a fresco depicting two musicians. And it's talking about these musical instruments that they're playing. But it says even after Roman rule was firmly established, the Etruscans had much influence on Roman religious practices and the music involved. Please don't miss that. Many, if not most, of the state musicians hired to play for Roman, religious, and other state festivals were Etruscans. Now let's look at some information from this book called Etruscan Studies, Journal of the Etruscan Foundation. It says the Etruscans left many painted scenes of musical performances, but no texts about music. Their Greek and Roman neighbors wrote a few comments, but most of our information must be drawn from Etruscan depictions. Descriptions of such scenes abound. It says the most complete review of the evidence is that of Fleischhauer, but even he hardly goes beyond the surface of images and text. When studied more closely, the monuments reveal substantial differences to the Greek world. Many emerge in Janot's series of precise studies of Etruscan instruments and musicians. An examination of the cylinder kithara reveals its unique intercultural distributions, of which Etruria was but one part, albeit the most important one. So let's take a look at some of these pictures. So we see a lot of action going on here in these pictures of them, and we already talked about the fact that they were a mixed race people. And you can see that even though these pictures are in black and white, some of them have a much darker hue. This one on the left is showing their musical instruments and how some of them are doing acrobatics. They're jumping and leaping, etc., as they're listening to the music. This is a close-up so that you can see these acrobatics and how vigorously they are dancing. Are we looking at break dancing here? Here we see some other examples, a close-up of them. We definitely see a lot of movement. They're very vigorous. And we see the darker skin tones. The captions on this one is telling us about the images we see on the left side. It's saying that there were a lot of high jumps. These are the high jumps of the Etruscan dancers. And it says they appear more vigorous than their Greek counterparts. In this one, you can clearly see that they are presenting something to a deity. The one on the right has wings. It says Apollo received by victory. So they are worshiping in dance, through music, etc. And we know that dancing is not an uncommon thing for us. Don't let the right song come on. You all know what I'm talking about. It's like it's in our blood. Scripture said in 2 Samuel 6 that David danced with all his might. He was leaping and dancing before the Most High. But I believe these depictions allow us to see what occurred during those times. And it's also a way for them to communicate to the generations that would come later. Remember, our enemy is crafty. They know how to communicate to stay on code. They use signs and symbols. Do we need words when we see images like this? It sends a message, doesn't it? This article is about the hooded penitents of Italy. One of our sisters sent this article to me. But look at this. What do you think of when you see pictures like this? Without them having to say a thing, you think this is the KKK. But they say no, they're not the KKK. We shouldn't believe our lying eyes on this one. These are supposed to be the good guys. How would our people know that? So this group, the penitents, the hooded penitents, are participating in a Good Friday penitent procession. And they say they're going to worship God. But who's God? And who are these people? This is a Roman Catholic religious group in Italy. Where did the Etruscans end up? In Italy. It says beginning in the mid-12th century, members of these brotherhoods were referred to as converso, church laymen who had made a conversion of life and were affiliated with a monastic order as lay brothers. It says in the past as well as today, the penitent brothers are known for wearing robes and pointed hoods during public processions on Catholic holy days, such as Good Friday. Listen, to hide their identities, both for purposes of hiding their sinfulness and providing anonymity for their charitable works. So the author says, I feel it must be pointed out that these are good-hearted, devout Catholics. Although their pointed caps and white robes repulse most Americans, the similar garb worn by the extreme racist members of the Ku Klux Klan and these pious Catholic brotherhoods have absolutely nothing in common with each other. The Klan sides with the devil. The penitents with God. Oh, really? Did they talk to the members of the KKK? Let's look at this from the Christian Post. KKK leader says, "We're a Christian organization." Claims the Klan is not a hate group. It says the KKK is a faith-based Christian organization that does not condone violence. Now, are you kidding me on this one? It says we don't hate people because of their race. We are a Christian organization. So think about it, family. Based on the definition of being a Christian that they created, that's what they are. How do these people get saved? The same way Christians get saved. They went to church, they went to the altar, they got baptized, they attend church regularly for worship service. Are these our brothers? We really need to rethink this thing. We really need to rethink this thing. Let's switch gears just a bit. I'm going to go back to something that was covered in the live session. We talked about how the oppressors used ritual sacrifices to appease their gods. Lynching was one way for them to do that. So this article from the Jim Crow Museum is talking about how the attendees at these events didn't take away a plate of food. But it says the experience of having witnessed the event was thought incomplete, listen, if one did not go home with some piece of the cooked being, the person that they just offered up. And there is much anecdotal evidence, it says, of lynch crowds either consuming food and drink while taking part in the execution or retiring en masse immediately afterward for a meal. Now I want you to think about the mindset of all these people standing here. Why would people allow themselves to be involved in something so wicked and evil? They're operating on a belief system. They were taught to believe something about themselves and about us. They were taught to believe that this was right by their kings and priests. So let's find out more about how they think. I'm going to read some excerpts from this book, The Ku Klux Klan or Invisible Empire. Why on earth do they refer to themselves as an empire? And why are they invisible? Now think about Daniel's vision. We're talking about that last beast that came up out of the sea. This says the Ku Klux had no written history. Their constitution declared that the origin, mysteries, and ritual of this order shall never be written, but shall be communicated orally. Communicated orally. But remember, they also use symbols and images. So it says, for the purpose of giving the youth of our land true history about this remarkable organization, whose services were of untold value to the South during a dark period of her history, this book is written. The facts herein contained are absolutely authentic, being recorded from the lips of the survivors themselves. So who endorsed this book? The United Daughters of the Confederacy and the Sons of the Confederate Veterans. Both groups helped to maintain the system and pass it on to future generations. So it says, the superstition of the Negro is well known, and through this element in his makeup, the Ku Klux gained control. They made the Negroes believe that they were the ghosts of their dead masters, and under the conviction that if they did wrong, Spirits from the other world would visit them. The Negroes became very quiet and subdued. So it says the peculiar fascination ever attendant upon things mysterious was always present with everything connected with the Ku Klux Klan. The invisible empire, as the territory under the control of the Klan was called, extended from Virginia to Texas and embraced about 14 states. The empire was subdivided into realms, realms into dominions, dominions into provinces, and provinces into dens, corresponding respectively to states, congressional districts, counties, and towns. Each department had its head officer, their duties being definitely designated, except those of the Grand Wizard, the supreme officer, whose control was absolute. Now listen and see if these names ring a bell. It says the following is a list of officers and their departments in regular order. The Grand Wizard of the Invisible Empire, assisted by his 10 genii. The Grand Dragon of the realm and his 8 hydras. The Grand Titan of the Dominion and his 6 furies. The Grand Giant of the province and his 4 goblins. The Grand Cyclops of the den and his 2 nighthawks. A Grand Turk, Grand Monk, Grand Exchequer, Grand Scribe, and Grand Sentinel were officers in the local dens. The genii, hydras, furies, goblins, nighthawks were staff officers, and the private members were called ghouls. There's more. Let's go on. The dens or places of rendezvous of the Ku Klux were generally in obscure places. Listen, in the thick weeds, in caves, or dilapidated buildings, devastated by time or storms, and given over to bats and owls. Their appearance was also so sudden that they seemed to have risen from the ground, and their disappearance being equally sudden, the impression was left that the earth had opened and swallowed them up. These mysterious maneuvers were all conjured up in the brain of the Ku Klux, and the weird and ghostly, the mysterious and unearthly, always predominated. No, it wasn't conjured up in their brains. It was passed down from their ancestors. Now take a look at this, family. This is enough right here to tell us what the ruling power is behind them. It says the banner of the Ku Klux. Directions for making the Ku Klux banner was as follows. The grand ensign or banner of the Ku Klux shall be in the form of an isosceles triangle, 5 feet long and 3 feet wide at the staff. The material shall be yellow with a red scalloped border, about 3 inches in width. There shall be painted upon it in black a dracovolin. What is that? A flying dragon, with the following motto inscribed on it. So this is a Latin phrase used by the Roman Catholic Church, but the phrase says, what always, what everywhere, what by all is held to be true. Is this not enough to tell us who we're dealing with here? The seed of the serpent. So they take a sacred oath. It's a binding oath. And what is the penalty for those divulging their secrets? It says they swear that they will obey all instructions given to them by their chief, and if they ever divulge or cause to be divulged any secrets, signs, or passwords of the invisible empire, listen, they said they must meet with the fearful and just penalty of the traitor, which is death, 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 at the hands of their brethren. So they also had a creed, and in the creed, they basically talk about how they had to reverence the majesty and supremacy of the divine being. Now, who is that divine being? The same one depicted on that banner we just looked at. Let's keep going. You can see here some of the costumes that they would wear. And it says, these costumes were intended to work upon the superstitious fears of the Negroes. No special instructions were given as to the color or makeup of these costumes, and each Ku Klux could give full play to his fancy in this regard, their aim being always to make them as grotesque as possible, so the costumes varied in different clans. These people are diabolical demons. They also talk about the different notices and warnings that they would put out when they were about to have their meetings or to go about with their ritual and sacrifice worships. It says notices of meetings were usually accompanied by a skull and crossbones. And it would say, Ku Klux Klan come fully armed. Be at the cemetery at 9 o'clock tonight. Now listen, it says, and warnings to offenders by a picture of a figure dangling from the limb of a tree, a coffin, or some gruesome emblem with a call to the Negroes and scalawags to beware. Listen to the names of some of the places where they would meet. The Serpent's Den, Hollow Tomb, Misery Cave of the Great Ku Klux Klan. Listen, it says, make ready, make ready, make ready the mighty hobgoblins of the Confederate dead in a hullabaloo assembled. Revenge, revenge, be secret, be cautious, be terrible. Are we not talking about the serpent seed here? It says, fire burn and cauldron bubble, ye white men who stick to black beasts. The time arrives for you to part. You and so from Omega to Alpha, cool it with a baboon's blood. Then the charm is firm and good. Ye niggers who stick to low whites, be gone, be gone, be gone. The world turns around, the 13th hour approaches. Family, I think it should be obvious that these are the seed of the serpent. It should also be obvious that these were ritual sacrifices. So you see here another costume on the right. And in the picture, it's saying that this is a picture of Dr. Carol Kendrick. So we're not talking about just common folks participating in this. So it says, from the murderer's gibbet, throw into flame, come high and low, by order of the great. Order of the great what? They're talking about their God. How did they maintain control? By using fear. And as we said earlier, religion. So I want to look at some information from Virginia Center for Civil War Studies. It says religion and resistance in enslaved communities. John Henning Woods, like many white Southerners, believed in the inferiority of African Americans through the mistaken assumption that enslaved people were contented with their condition. Mistaken assumption? No. It says, have human beings ever happily accepted the status of property? How did enslaved people challenge the institution of slavery in white society? Through religion. Enslaved people resisted slavery. Religious life in the enslaved community served as a defense against slavery and a source of collective strength. Religion offered a social sphere within enslaved communities that relieved experiences of dehumanization under slavery. Many enslavers required African Americans to attend church with white people and white preachers so that they could control their access to religion. In order to experience more authentic preaching, African Americans formed their own invisible institution in the slave quarters. So it says, while white people were not watching them, enslaved people preached and discuss their own interpretations of the Bible during secret services and meetings. So they were forced to attend. Why? To be indoctrinated. But our ancestors knew that something was wrong with what they were being taught. Wash Wilson, a former enslaved person from Texas, described how the enslaved people on his plantation would sing "Steal Away to Jesus" during the day to indicate that a religious meeting would occur that night. He explained that enslavers did not approve of religious meetings and that the enslaved people on his plantation would slip off at night down in the bottoms or somewhere. Sometimes us sing and pray all night. Religion offered an identity that was not based on the condition of their slavery. But the condition was passed on, family. It was passed on through the music, through the religious experience. We kept passing it down to the next generation. Hopefully you can see that religion was used to inflict the ultimate revenge on us. The enemy used the oracles that were given to us to fashion a religious system, hoping to ensnare and entrap. But it could only last for so long. The things given to us by the Most High, to include our gifts and our talents, were used against us. And this is why they wanted to get their hands on our books. Here's the thing. They can't change the truth of what has been written. It's recorded in the heavens. Those things will still come to pass. But I believe the Father is allowing us to see how this game was played. In the end, we win. He established the nation of Israel for a reason. Let's not forget that. I'll leave you with these words. Hear the words of the Most High, and this comes from Zechariah 9:11-13. As for you also, because of the blood of your covenant, I will set your prisoners free from the waterless pit. Because of the blood of our covenant, we're going to be set free. The enemy may have taken everything else from us, but they couldn't take that. We have a covenant. It says, return to the stronghold, you prisoners of hope. Even today I declare that I will restore double to you. For I have bent Judah, my bow, fitted the bow with Ephraim, and raised up your sons, O Zion, against your sons, O Greece. We're talking about the Gentiles. And made you like the sword of a mighty man. So yes, in the end, we win. The writing is on the wall, and I believe that our enemies know that. If this message has been a blessing to you, please hit the like and share it. You're also welcome to subscribe if you have not already done so. We normally upload the messages on Sunday mornings at 8:30 a.m. Yah willing. Join me next time.